Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture we're going to look at how we can upgrade our EBS volume types from one storage medium to another. So where we might want to do this is, let's say we've got a database server on EC2, we've got our primary root partition, and then we're running a database, a MySQL database, on a additional partition. And this is a test and dev environment, and we've been running it on either general purpose SSD or magnetic storage, and now we want to move this into production, so we want to change the volume to have provisioned IOPS. So we're going to see how we can do this. Let's just go into EC2. If you guys have done the Solutions Architect, or I think it's in the Solutions Architect course, we've done this previously, but it doesn't hurt just to watch how it's done again. So go into EC2 and we'll create a new instance. I'm just going to use the Amazon Linux AMI, and I'm going to use it as a T2 micro. And I go in and I'm going to basically keep everything as default. Go in and add my storage, and I'm going to add a new volume, and this volume is going to be mapped to SDB, or it might be XVDB, depending on how it comes out. And here I'm going to change this to magnetic. So we're going to start with magnetic. You can see straight away that we're not going to get any IOPS for our magnetic, or it's not going to guarantee us IOPS per gig for our magnetic. Delete on termination is not ticked by default, so I'm going to leave that as it is. I'm going to go ahead and tag the instance. We're just going to call this my test MySQL DB. Okay, and I'm going to, you guys can create a new security group. I'm going to put mine just in a standard security group that I have, which is called MyWebDMZ. It's basically open to the world. It's not very secure, but I don't actually use this for production. And then it says improve your instance's security. I'm going to ignore that. It's just saying that port 22 is open to the world and you should lock it down. And then you can either create a new key pair or use an existing key pair. I'm going to use my WordPress key. Go ahead and launch. And so this is now going to provision my EC2 instance, and I'm going to have a couple of volumes attached to it. I'm going to have my root volume as well as my magnetic storage volume, and you'll be able to see these two volumes here are basically getting attached to this. We can go over here and have a look. My test MySQL DB. So once these have been provisioned, I'm going to go in and SSH into them. Again, hopefully you guys have done the Solutions Architect or the Developer course, so you know how to connect into your EC2 instances. If you do have any problems, just let me know in the chat. So I'm just going to wait and wait for these to be initialized. And then in the next screen, we're going to see once I've logged into this instance. So I'm just going to pause the video now. Okay, so for those of you who are new to SSH, it's probably very few of you, but just in case, this is how you do it. So essentially you just type in SSH, your username is ec2-user @ then you want to cut and paste your public IP address or your elastic IP address that you have when you created your EC2 instance, and then you want to use the -i and then the name of your key. So mine's called mywordpresskey.pem, and essentially you get a message just saying, do you want to trust this, and say yes. And now it's added it to the list of known hosts, and I want to elevate my privileges to root. And then I'm going to clear my screen. So the first thing I want to do is just see what volumes have been mounted to this EC2 instance. So if we just go back to our control panel and have a look at our volumes, you can actually see this is our magnetic storage volume, and you can tell that because the volume type says standard, and we can see that it is attached to the MySQL DB. That's the instance name of our EC2 instance. So it is attached to the instance, but we haven't actually mounted it. So if we go back in here, we type in this command lsblk, you'll be able to see that the XVDA volume is mounted, and this is where it's mounted to, so it's mounted to the root partition. And we have attached XVDB to this EC2 instance, but we haven't actually created a file system on this volume and then mounted the volume to a specific directory. So that's what we're going to do now. So we're going to type in make file system, and then we're going to do -t xt4, and then we're going to enter in the device name. So in this particular instance, it's going to be dev xvdb. Okay, and that's going to create a file system. Now, if you were restoring from a snapshot, you really wouldn't want to do that because that is going to essentially wipe the snapshot. So we will have a look at how to handle that situation when we essentially restore the volume when it's provisioned IOPS. So we'll look at that in a little bit later. But for now, we've created a file system, and now what we need to do is we need to go in and just basically mount it to a specific point. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a directory, and I'm going to call it we'll call it A Cloud Guru, and then we're going to mount this volume to that directory. So we're going to do that by typing in mount, then the device name, so in this case it's dev xvdb, and then it's going to go to A Cloud Guru, which is our mount point. And now if we clear the screen and we type in lsblk, we can now see over here that it is mounted to this A Cloud Guru partition. So we'll go into A Cloud Guru, type ls, we've got our lost and found directory, and we're going to go in here and we're just going to make a new file. So I'm going to run nano, and I call this my test.html file. And in here I'm just going to write test, test, test. This could be a web page, this could be our MySQL database. And I could go in and just hit Control X for those who are using a Mac or PC, hit yes, and hit enter. And now if we type ls, we can see this file called test.html. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to clear the screen, and I'm going to unmount this directory, or this volume from our EC2 instance. So I'm going to go back a directory, and now I'm going to type in, I'm going to clear the screen, and I'm going to type in umount /dev/xvdb. Okay, so we've now unmounted that directory, that volume, and if we go into the A Cloud Guru directory and run an ls, you can see that it's empty. So come out of that directory. I'm just going to remount it just so you guys can see that the data is still there. So we're going to go in and we're going to type in mount dev xvdb, and then the mount point, which is A Cloud Guru. And then if we go into the directory and run ls, you can see that the test.html file is there. So we'll come out of it again, and one last time we are going to umount dev xvdb. Okay, so it's unmounted, and if we just want to test it one more time, you can see that there's nothing there. So now that it has been unmounted, I'm actually going to detach this from my EC2 instance, and I can do that by going back to my my EC2 or my web console, and just make sure you click on volumes, find the volume, and then you can go in and go actions, detach volume. And if that was mounted, you can use force detach volume, and that will force Amazon to detach the volume, and you don't need to go in and unmount it manually, but that can take some more time. And of course, if your EC2 instance is writing to that volume when you're forcing a detach, you can get data corruption. So I'm going to go in and just hit detach volume. It's going to take a little while, so I'm just going to pause the video and refresh the screen, and then what we're going to do with this detached volume is we're going to create a snapshot. So just give me a couple of minutes, guys. Okay, so that has now successfully been detached, and what I could do is I could attach this to other EC2 instances and mount it, and effectively when I do that, I could go in and see that test HTML page. But I'm not going to do that in this lecture. In this lecture we want to look at how we can upgrade the storage medium. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in here and we're going to create a snapshot, and we're going to call this the test HTML vol. Test HTML vol. I'm going to go ahead and hit create, and that's now going to start creating a snapshot. I can come in here and see my snapshots. This is going to take a couple of minutes to do, so I'm going to pause the video, and then we're going to restore this snapshot. So I'm just going to pause the video now. Okay, so that snapshot has now completed, and essentially what I want to do is I want to create a new volume off the back of this snapshot. So I'm going to go in and hit create volume, and I'm going to change the type. So originally we had magnetic, I could now have general purpose or provisioned IOPS, and I'm just going to go for provisioned IOPS, and I'm going to go ahead and hit create. So that has now successfully created a new volume. Okay, so we're now going to see if we can find it, and the easiest way to find it is by looking at our volume types. So IO1 means provisioned IOPS, whereas GP2 is general purpose, and standard is simply magnetic. So this is our new volume here, and what I want to now do is I want to go and attach it to my EC2 instance. So I need to normally know my instance name. If you click in the box you'll be able to see, and we called it my test SQLDB. And then we'll go ahead and hit attach. So that is now being attached to my instance, and if I go back to my SSH window, I'm just going to clear the screen here, and now I'm going to run lsblk. Okay, so we can see a new partition which is called xvdf. This is a new volume essentially, and it's not called xvdb. And what I mentioned before about running a command to create a new file system. If you are restoring from a snapshot and you want to see if there's data on it before you mount the volume, you can run the following command. So you can type in file -s and then dev and then xvdf. And you can see here it comes up and says large files, huge files, or it comes up with data essentially. Now if that was empty, it would just say the word data. If it says something else where it talks about journal recoveries or large files, huge files, that means that it has data on it. So right now it comes up with some more information than just saying data, which means that it has data already on it. So what I want to do now is I'm going to mount my dev xvdf to my A Cloud Guru directory, and then if we go into A Cloud Guru, you can see, and we hit ls, and there you go, there's the test.html, and we can go in and have a look at it. Test.html, and we can see our data is still in there. So in our scenario we were talking about basically having a MySQL server. It is running the MySQL databases off a separate volume, and it's test and dev. It might be on magnetic or general purpose SSD, and we then want to essentially upgrade the storage type to provisioned IOPS. So the way we would go about doing that is we would first stop the MySQL service, we would then unmount the volume, and then detach it from the EC2 instance. We then take a snapshot of that EC2 instance, and then we restore a new volume from the snapshot, and we change the storage medium. And then when we go in there and remount it to our EC2 instance, we'll still see the same file structure, but this will now be on provisioned IOPS as opposed to magnetic drives. So just remember that those steps going into the exam can be an exam question. It's good to know as sysops administrators anyway how we can change the storage, underlying storage devices while keeping our files consistent. So guys, if you have any questions, please let me know. If not, feel free to move on to the next lecture. Thank you.